What is the essence of storytelling? What makes a good story? And how do you research your story ideas before heading to a particular location? During the interview, you have already shared some notions on your approach, but
Right.
if you can just focus on the storytelling and the research, that's something that personally I find fascinating, how people address the same thing differently. So I would like to know how Jim Richardson does
Right.
his research.
Well, I think I think one of the aspects of that is to understand that yes, there needs to be a story. In other words, it can't just be a collection of pictures.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be a story arc, a path, a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can put it that way. Um, a a narrative. We can come up with lots of synonyms, other words for that. But even in the visual side of it, because so often what actually happens when we talk about a picture story is we're talking about a story that started out as a word story, and then someone went out and took pictures to document that what's in the story actually happened. In other words, the story says there's a big dam on the Colorado River called the Hoover Dam, so you go get a picture of the Hoover Dam. That's it, and that happens over and over again. That's how a lot of picture stories get done. It even happens amongst photographers who think very literally in words,
Mm-hmm.
and then go looking specifically for pictures to show that thing. Well, yes, that happens, and that's necessary, but it isn't the same thing as a visual narrative that carries its own story visually.
Mm-hmm.
Visually, yes. So I think I can, from one of my own examples here, I can best say this. We were doing a series of stories at National Geographic, landscape stories on various landscapes. And we had done things like the Grand Canyon and the other, greatest hits kind of places. And I live here in Kansas, and we have the Tall Grass Prairie Preserve, which is not exactly a national park, but close. And it's about grasslands. And I proposed that story to National Geographic, particularly because I knew that if I didn't do it, nobody else is going to do it, because grasslands are really tough to photograph. So somebody had to have a connection with the place in order to make it worth doing. So to do that story, what I knew was that I couldn't just go there and do a lot of pictures, nice landscape pictures, and when I had enough, go back to National Geographic and say, okay, here they are. No, there had to be a visual narrative, and so I had to build the narrative. I had to search for and build the storyline. And so what I decided I would do was be the storyline would be the seasons, but not the seasons, spring, summer, winter, fall, kind of seasons. I wanted to do this more dramatic seasons, and that was fire and death, rebirth, life, and continuation.
Mm-hmm.
So and I could do that in the Flint Hills because every year they burn off the prairie. The ranchers go out and they replicate what the Native Americans did, and the Native Americans replicated what lightning strikes did before any humans were here on the prairie. And that's why the prairie is not a forest, because of the fire. The fire stops little trees from growing. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want a grassland, you need to burn it. So it's part of the ecosystem. So I could do a storyline that was fire, death, rebirth,
Mm-hmm.
growth, and old age. Whatever this is. And so the first one I knew that I was going to do was fire when they're out burning, and it had to look like conflagration. It couldn't be pretty. That's one of the things. It couldn't be a pretty picture of fire. It had to be raging fire. It had to be, and then it had to be black bleakness, black, and then after that, 5 or 6 weeks later, when the grass has regrown, it needed to be green lushness, absolutely green, So I knew that as the pages turned, it had to go from red flames to green emerald lushness in a page turn, so that you got that. And then the storms that came, the raging storms of summer, and the lush wildflowers that followed the raging storms, and things like that. But it was, even for a landscape story about that, it had to have a progression, and the storyline had to come from me. I couldn't just go there one time and collect all that stuff, and I had to know exactly what I was going for, so that I wouldn't do the same pictures over and over and over again, however pretty they might be. So each of those pictures had to carry a different emotional impact, and it had to fit into that storyline. One of the pictures that I ended up getting, I didn't know all of this, what would happen. One of the story pictures I did get was this sense of tranquility of fireflies out on this blue scene of far after sunset, of fireflies out there twinkling.
I think I've seen that photograph. I remember.
Yeah. So it had a beautiful sense of tranquility, and people really got that. And so in the story proposal, I said that I could do pictures. I put in there about